Poe Dameron's role throughout the sequel trilogy presents a consistent thematic pattern. His character arc transitions from individual tactical proficiency to broader strategic responsibility. This shift is identifiable through repeated contrasts between his early decisions, which emphasize operational success, and his later actions, which align with leadership requirements within the Resistance. The films frame these developments through explicit dialogue, organizational consequences, and contrast between Poe and senior leadership figures such as General Organa, Vice Admiral Holdo, and Lando Calrissian. Poe's initial characterization in The Force Awakens establishes him as a highly competent pilot, whose contributions are primarily operational. His actions during the rescue of Finn, the strike on Starkiller Base, and the engagements preceding the destruction of the Oscillator frame him as a tactically effective combatant. However, these contributions occur within a larger command structure that shields him from strategic decision-making. His responsibilities remain limited to execution, not deliberation, which sets the foundation for the corrective trajectory presented in later installments. In The Last Jedi, Poe's decision to lead the bombing attack against the Mandata 4 dreadnought demonstrates the gap between tactical ambition and strategic discipline. Leia's reprimand clarifies that the mission's cost was disproportionately high relative to its tactical gain. The explicit loss of the Resistance's entire bombing fleet establishes objective consequences. Poe's decision eliminated a vital component of the Resistance arsenal during an already resource-constrained conflict. This outcome is tied directly to Poe's failure to evaluate operational risk in relation to long-term strategic sustainability. Leia's demotion of Poe reinforces the structural distinction within the Resistance between action-oriented operatives and leadership personnel. Through this disciplinary measure, the film indicates that Poe's tactical expertise does not translate automatically into leadership capability. The demotion signals an institutional boundary. Command requires evaluation of survivability, logistics, and broader political considerations that Poe has not yet demonstrated. This formal consequence frames the key thematic challenge of the character's arc. Poe's conflict with Vice Admiral Holdo further illustrates the limitations of his early leadership assumptions. Holdo's refusal to share classified operational details with Poe is consistent with military protocol. Poe's reaction, attempting a mutiny, reveals his reliance on situational awareness derived from cockpit-level information rather than operational planning. This distinction highlights the core issue. Poe expects transparency based on his tactical role, while Holdo operates within a chain-of-command framework prioritizing information compartmentalization. The mutiny sequence provides clear evidence of Poe's underdeveloped understanding of strategic complexity. The scene demonstrates that Poe interprets a lack of immediate offensive action as incompetence or inaction. Holdo's actual plan, which requires minimizing Resistance casualties and seeking long-term survivability through evacuation, reveals Poe's assumption-driven approach. His failure to consider alternative strategies results in an internal crisis that further strains Resistance resources. Leia's return and subsequent incapacitation shift Poe into a transitional leadership position. The text of the film emphasizes that Poe is assigned provisional responsibility due to situational necessity, rather than qualification. This distinction is reinforced by his initial doubts and the acknowledgement that he lacks a comprehensive operational framework. The film uses Poe's uncertainty as evidence that leadership is an acquired competency rather than an intrinsic attribute. During the Crate engagement, Poe begins exhibiting strategic behavior. His decision to abort the attack on the battering ram cannon demonstrates a newly developed ability to weigh operational risk against projected benefit. This decision directly contrasts with his earlier insistence on maximizing offensive action regardless of cost. The shift indicates that Poe is learning to prioritize personnel preservation, a core requirement of command. Poe's coordination of the retreat into the mine tunnels further establishes his evolving role. He transitions from direct engagement to organizational management, directing non-pilot personnel, monitoring enemy movements, and adjusting plans based on rapidly changing circumstances. These actions reflect a progression from individual heroism to systems-level decision-making, marking a central point of development in his narrative arc. In The Rise of Skywalker, Poe's appointment as acting general demonstrates institutional recognition of his growth. His discomfort with this assignment serves as textual evidence that leadership in the resistance requires adaptation rather than confidence. His self-admitted uncertainty underscores the distinction between operational courage and strategic burden, a distinction the trilogy repeatedly foregrounds. Poe's interactions with Lando Calrissian illustrate the structural necessity of coalition-based leadership. Poe's request for assistance demonstrates a shift from individual execution to distributed responsibility. The film presents this as an explicit recognition that effective leadership requires delegation, network building, and reliance on external support rather than individual capability. During the Exegol assault, Poe demonstrates multifaceted command. He coordinates fleet movements, evaluates unexpected variables such as the destruction of key ally ships, and adjusts tactics dynamically based on situational developments. These actions provide concrete evidence of growth. Poe integrates tactical knowledge with strategic assessment, balancing immediate threats with broader operational objectives. Poe's decision to relinquish sole responsibility by encouraging Finn and other leaders to assume shared command roles reflects a significant structural shift in his character. This choice demonstrates an understanding that leadership requires collective input, diversified perspectives, and distributive command authority. The trilogy uses this decision to complete the arc from individual heroism to shared strategic governance. Furthermore, Poe's leadership effectiveness is measured through the morale and responsiveness of resistance personnel. Unlike earlier scenes where Poe acts independently or against orders, the Exegol sequences show cohesive alignment between Poe and his subordinates. Their willingness to follow him under pressure indicates that he has gained institutional legitimacy beyond his piloting reputation. The cumulative evidence across the trilogy establishes that Poe's arc is not about enhancing his heroic image, but about integrating tactical proficiency with strategic responsibility. The films consistently reinforce this progression through structural consequences, leadership contrasts, and explicit shifts in decision-making patterns. Poe emerges not as a traditional action hero, but as a figure shaped by the requirements and burdens of command. Poe Dameron's development in The Last Jedi and The Rise of Skywalker demonstrates a structured shift from individualized action toward organizational leadership. This progression is traceable through his interactions with command figures, the changing nature of his responsibilities, and the operational consequences of his decisions. The films construct this evolution through repeated contrasts between Poe's initial behavior patterns and the formal demands of command roles within the Resistance. Following Leia Organa's incapacitation in The Last Jedi, Poe is placed into a provisional position that mirrors the responsibilities of upper leadership. The narrative uses this moment to highlight structural gaps in Poe's readiness. His immediate reaction is uncertainty, expressed through statements indicating a lack of preparedness. These textual markers frame Poe's transition as an imposed necessity rather than a natural extension of his earlier traits. Poe's collaboration with Finn, Rose, and other personnel shows the early stages of distributed leadership. Rather than engaging in isolated tactical missions, Poe participates in discussions regarding resource allocation, evacuation planning, and survival strategies. The films emphasize that Poe's prior approach, oriented toward individual heroics, is insufficient for the logistical and strategic demands he now faces. Poe's behavior during the Crate evacuation further demonstrates his emerging capacity for strategic thinking. His decision to halt the offensive against the battering ram cannon reveals an ability to assess diminishing returns and prioritize personnel preservation. This stands in direct contrast to his earlier insistence on completing the Dreadnought assault, regardless of casualties. The adjustment marks a significant deviation from his previously established patterns. In The Rise of Skywalker, the narrative positions Poe as one of the central command figures, reflecting institutional recognition of his previous development. His immediate reluctance to accept full responsibility after Leia's death is a critical textual indicator. It demonstrates that Poe understands the gravity of leadership roles and recognizes the limitations of his prior experience. This acknowledgement signals a maturation aligned with strategic awareness rather than tactical enthusiasm. Poe's interactions with Finn and Rey highlight the collaborative framework of his later leadership. Rather than issuing unilateral directives, Poe increasingly relies on dialogue and input from others with specialized knowledge. The films illustrate this shift through scenes where Poe consults Finn about ground operations and relies on Rey for information regarding Sith artifacts and Force-related implications. This pattern indicates recognition that leadership requires synthesizing diverse competencies. His concerns regarding the Resistance's limited resources and the overwhelming power of the Final Order illustrate an enhanced understanding of macro-level strategic variables. Poe evaluates fleet condition, reinforcement likelihood, and morale levels before committing to major operations. These considerations contrast sharply with his earlier decision-making in The Last Jedi, where he prioritized immediate tactical victories over resource sustainability. Poe's request for assistance from Lando Calrissian reflects an important structural milestone. The action demonstrates that Poe no longer equates leadership with personal capability. Instead, he recognizes the necessity of coalition building, recruitment, and broader networking. This shift aligns him with leaders who operate through distributed influence, rather than direct operational participation. During the Exegol engagement, Poe's command responsibilities require continuous assessment of an unstable tactical environment. He reacts to the loss of Allied ships, adjusts maneuver plans, reallocates starfighters, and coordinates with ground teams. These sequences provide direct evidence that Poe has integrated tactical analysis with broader operational oversight, demonstrating the shift from pilot to general. His partnership with Finn during this engagement reinforces the shift toward co-leadership. Poe explicitly acknowledges that he cannot execute the operation independently, assigning Finn responsibility for ground operations while he coordinates aerial forces. This division of labor reflects an adaptive leadership model, indicating that Poe understands the importance of delegating authority to maximize operational effectiveness. The film further demonstrates Poe's progression through the responsiveness of Resistance personnel. Earlier scenes showed tension or defiance arising from Poe's unilateral actions, particularly during the mutiny incident. In contrast, Resistance pilots and officers follow his Exegol directives without hesitation. This shift in group response patterns indicates that Poe's leadership now aligns with institutional expectations and command legitimacy. Poe's hesitation before ordering the final charge on Exegol underscores his newly developed capacity for risk evaluation. He waits for confirmations, evaluates reinforcements, and considers casualty projections before committing the fleet. This contrasts significantly with earlier scenes where he prioritized action over deliberation. The shift highlights his growth in planning and assessment rather than reflexive engagement. His willingness to acknowledge potential failure during the battle demonstrates a mature understanding of strategic uncertainty. Poe openly expresses concern that reinforcements may not arrive, indicating a recognition that leadership requires transparency regarding operational realities. The ability to communicate uncertainty without compromising morale marks a significant departure from his earlier behavior. Poe's decision to guide the Resistance through a recovery period after the battle, as implied by the celebratory and organizational scenes at the film's conclusion, reinforces his arc. His actions indicate an assumption of long-term administrative responsibility, not merely tactical oversight. The shift from pilot to organizational leader is emphasized through his interactions with other figures who now view him as a central coordinating presence. The trilogy uses this structural transformation to reposition Poe within the Resistance hierarchy. His early contributions were defined by technical skill and individual initiative, while his later contributions involve planning, delegation, and command. The contrast between these phases establish his arc as one focused on integrating tactical effectiveness with strategic responsibility. In summary, Poe Dameron's development is defined by a consistent progression from operational competence to leadership maturity. The films illustrate this through explicit disciplinary events, evolving behavioral patterns, shifting interactions with senior figures, and increased reliance on collaborative decision-making. The evidence demonstrates that Poe's arc reflects the acquisition of strategic awareness required for effective command within the Resistance.
Thank you for watching. Be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that share button. My main channel is Critical Analysis Hub, where I post Star Wars content about the movies. My secondary channel is Critical Analysis Hub Plus, where I focus on the shows of Star Wars. And my third channel is Critical Analysis Hub XP, where I post comic books. Be sure to take a moment and check them out. Thanks, and may the Force be with you.